Chapter 4. The demon saw Kitty the moment she moved. A wide mouth opened in the stubby, featureless head. Double rows of teeth descended from above and rose from the lining of the jaw. It snipped its teeth together curiously, making a noise like 1,000 scissors slicing in unison. Folds of gray-green flesh shifted on either side of the skull, revealing 2 golden eyes that glinted as they turned on her. Kitty did not repeat her mistake. She stood stock still, barely 6 feet from the bent and snuffling head, and held her breath. The demon scraped a foot experimentally against the floor, scoring 5 thick claw gashes in the tiles. It made a curious crooning noise deep in its throat. It was sizing her up. She knew it was, appraising her strength, debating whether to attack. In the final moments of crisis, her brain took in many irrelevant details of its guise. The flecks of gray hair about the joints, the bright metal scales upon the torso, the hands with too many fingers and too few bones. Her own limbs shook. Her hands twitched as if to encourage her to run, but she fought against her fear and beat it down. Then a voice came, sweet and female, curiously inquiring. "Aren't you going to run, my dear? I can only lope along on these club feet. Oh, me, so slow. Try it. You never know. You might escape." So gentle was the voice, it took Kitty a moment to realize it came from the dreadful mouth. It was the demon that spoke. Numbly she shook her head. The demon flexed 6 fingers in an incomprehensible gesture. "Then at least step towards me," the sweet voice said. "It would save me the torture of hobbling over to you on these poor club feet of mine. Ah, me, so sore. My essence flinches from the pull of your harsh, cruel earth." Again, Kitty shook her head, slower this time. The demon sighed, bowing its head as if crushed and disappointed. "My dear, you have no courtesy. I wonder whether your essence would disagree with me if I ate you. I am a martyr to indigestion." The head rose, the eyes sparkled, the teeth snipped like 1,000 scissors. "I will risk it." Without pause, the leg joints bent and sprang. The jaws opened wide, wide, wide. The fingers clasped. Kitty fell back, screamed. A wall of silver shards, thin as rapiers, rose from the floor, spearing the demon as it leaped. A flash, a shower of sparks. Its body burst into lilac flames. It hovered in midair for a split second, twitched, emitted a single gout of smoke, then drifted softly to the floor, light as burning paper. A little voice whispered, sad, resentful. "Ah, me." Now it was nothing but a husk, which fell in upon itself and presently dwindled into ashes. Kitty's muscles were frozen in a rictus of terror. With a grim effort, she managed to close her mouth and blink. Once, twice. She ran a trembling hand through her hair. "Great heavens," her master said from the pentacle on the opposite side of the room. "I didn't expect that. But the stupidity of these creatures is boundless. Sweep away the mess, dear Lizzie, and we can discuss the procedure. You must be very proud of your success." Dumbly, eyes still staring, Kitty managed the faintest of nods. She stepped stiff-legged from the circle and went to fetch the broom. "Well, you're a clever girl, and make no mistake." Her master was sitting on the sofa nearest the window, sipping from a china cup. "And you make good tea, too, which is a blessing on a day like this one." Rain battered the window panes and gusted haphazardly across the street. The wind whined in the passages of the house. Kitty drew her feet up out of the draught skirling across the floor and took a swig of strong brown tea from her mug. The old man wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Yes, a very satisfactory summons. Not bad at all. And most interesting for me. Who'd have thought the true form of a succubus looked like that? Gracious. Now, Lizzie, did you notice that you slightly mispronounced the restraining syllable right at the end? Not enough to break the safety wall, but the creature was emboldened, thought it would try its luck. Fortunately, everything else you did was perfect." Kitty was still shaking. She sank back amongst the cushions of the ancient sofa. "If I'd made any other mistakes, sir," she said haltingly, "what would have—" "Oh, gracious, I wouldn't worry your head about that. You didn't, and that's what counts. Have a chocolate digestive." He indicated the plate between them. "Settles the stomach, I find." She took a biscuit, dunked it in her tea. "But why did it attack me?" she said, frowning. "Surely it must have been able to tell that the Pentacle's defenses would come into force." Her master chuckled. "Who can say? Perhaps it hoped you would flinch out of the circle as it leaped. That would have instantly destroyed its prison and allowed it to devour you. Notice that it had already tried 2 childish stratagems to persuade you to leave the Pentacle. It was not a sophisticated Jinny, but perhaps it had grown tired of bondage. Perhaps it simply wished to die." He eyed the dregs at the bottom of his teacup musingly. "Who can tell? We understand so little about demons, about what makes them tick. They are hard to fathom. Is there any more in the pot?" Kitty inspected it. "Nope. I'll make some more." "If you would, dear Lizzie, if you would. You might pass me that copy of Trismegistus on your way out. It has some interesting notes on succubi, if I recall." Chill air bit into her as she entered the passage and stomped down to the kitchen. There, leaning close to the blue gas flame hissing beneath the kettle, her self-control finally slackened. She began to tremble, proper heavy body-shuddering shakes that made her grasp the work surface for support. She closed her eyes. The demon's open jaws plummeted towards her. She opened them again at speed. A paper bag of fruit sat beside the sink. Mechanically, she took an apple and ate it, gulping it down desperately in great rough chunks. She took another and finished it more slowly, staring sightlessly at the wall. Her trembling subsided. The kettle whistled. Jacob was right, she thought, rinsing her mug under an icy stream of water. "I'm an idiot. Nobody but a fool would do this. Nobody but a fool." But a fool could still be lucky. And so far, for 3 long years, her luck had held. Since the day when her death had been reported and accepted, and the authorities had sealed their file on her with a blob of hot black wax, Kitty had never once left London. No matter that her good friend Jacob Hiernick, safe with relatives in Bruges and working as a jeweler, sent her imploring epistles weekly, begging her to come and live with him. No matter that his family urged her, during their secretive, irregular meetings, to leave the dangers of the city and start her life afresh. No matter that her common sense cried out to her that she could do nothing useful on her own. Kitty was undeterred. In London she remained. Stubborn still she might be, but her old recklessness was now swathed with caution. Everything from her appearance to her daily routine was carefully judged to avoid rousing the suspicions of the authorities. This was essential, since for Kitty Jones existence was itself a crime. To conceal herself from the eyes of those few who knew her, she had cropped her dark hair short and wore it in a bob beneath her cap. She kept tight rein on her mobile features, no matter what the provocation. She did her best to be dull-eyed, stone-faced, nothing but a numeral in a crowd. Though perhaps a little thinner in the face from overwork and lack of inessential food, though perhaps a little lined around the eyes, she still possessed the same mercurial energies that had borne her into the resistance and out again, alive. They supported her in pursuit of a certain ambitious project, and in the maintenance of no fewer than 2 false identities. She had taken lodgings on the 3rd floor of a dilapidated West London townhouse, in a street near the munitions factories. Above and below her bedsit were several other rooms that had been crammed by the enterprising landlord into the shell of an old building. Each was occupied, but save for the caretaker, a diminutive man who lived in the basement, Kitty had not spoken to any of the tenants. She passed them on the stairs sometimes, men and women, old and young, all living lives of isolation and anonymity. She was satisfied with this. She both liked and needed the solitude of the house afforded her. The contents of her room were few: a small white cooker, a fridge, a cupboard, and, in a corner, behind a dangling sheet, a sink and toilet. Below the window, which looked out over a tangle of walls and unkept yards to the house backs opposite, sat a confusion of jumbled sheets and pillows. Kitty's bed. Beside this were neatly stacked her worldly possessions: clothes, tins of food, newspapers, recent pamphlets about the war. Her most precious items were variously hidden beneath the mattress: a silver throwing disc wrapped in a handkerchief, in the cistern of her toilet, a sealed plastic bag containing the documents she needed to maintain her new identities, and at the bottom of her laundry bag, several thick books bound in leather. Being of practical disposition, Kitty did not regard her room with great affection. It was a place to sleep and little more. She did not spend much time in it. Nevertheless, it was her home, and she had lived there for 3 years. The name she had given the landlord was Clara Bell. This coincided with the documents that she carried around with her most often: the stamped identity card in the residence, health and education papers that mapped out her recent past. They had been forged for her with great skill by old Mr. Hearnick, Jacob's father, who had also created a separate set for her under the name of Lizzie Temple. She did not have any papers with her real name. Only at night, when she lay back in the bed with curtains drawn and the single light switched off, did she become Kitty Jones once more. It was an identity swathed in darkness and dreams. For some months, following Jacob's departure, Clara Bell had worked at the Hearnick's printing factory, delivering newly bound books and earning a basic wage. This did not last long. Kitty was reluctant to imperil her friends by too close an association, and had quickly taken on an evening job at a pub beside the river. By then, however, her humdrum errands had provided her with a most unusual opportunity. One morning, Kitty had been summoned to Mr. Hearnick's office and handed a package to deliver. It was heavy, smelled of glue and leather, and was methodically wrapped in string. It was labeled, Mr. H. Button, Magician. Kitty inspected the address.
Earl's Court,
she said.
Not many magicians there.
Mr. Hearnick was attending to his pipe with a blackened penknife and a piece of cloth. Among our beloved rulers, he said, flicking out a fragment of burnt clag, this Button is regarded as an incurable eccentric. He's skilled enough, by all accounts, but has never attempted to rise through the political ranks. Used to work as a librarian at the London Library, until he had an accident. Lost a leg. Now just reads, collects books where he can, writes a bit. Told me once that he was interested in knowledge for its own sake. Hence, no money. Hence, Earl's Court. Take it along, will you? Kitty had done so, and found Mr. Button's house in a region of grey-white villas, tall and heavy, with immense pillars supporting ostentatious porches above the doors. Once they had been occupied by the rich. Now the district carried a melancholy aura of poverty and decay. Mr. Button lived at the end of a tree-lined cul-de-sac, in a house shrouded by dark laurels. Kitty had rung the bell and waited on a stained and dirty step. No one answered. She noticed then that the door was hanging ajar. She peered inside. A dilapidated hall, made narrow by stacks of books against the walls. She coughed uncertainly.
Hello?
Yes, come in. A muffled voice echoed faintly. At speed, if you will. I am a little inconvenienced. Kitty hastened forwards, and in a neighboring room, rendered indistinct by dust-caked curtains drawn across the windows, discovered a twitching boot protruding from beneath a colossal pile of fallen books. Exploring further, she came upon the head and neck of an elderly gentleman, vainly struggling to wriggle free. Without preamble, Kitty made a rapid excavation. In a few minutes, Mr. Button was settled in a nearby chair, a little crumpled and very out of breath. Thank you, my dear. Would you mind passing me my stick? I was using it to extract a book, which I fear caused all the trouble. Kitty rescued a long ash stick from among the debris and handed it to the magician. He was a small and fragile man, bright-eyed, thin-faced, with a disordered mop of straight gray hair hanging low over his forehead. He wore a checkered shirt without a tie, a patched green cardigan and gray trousers, scuffed and stained. One trouser leg was missing. It had been folded over and sewn shut just above the torso. Something about his appearance disconcerted her. It took her a moment to realize she had never seen a magician so informally dressed. I was simply trying to get a hold of a volume of Gibbon, Mr. Button was saying, which I spied at the bottom of a pile. I was careless and lost my balance. There was such a landslide. You cannot imagine how taxing it is to find anything in this place. Kitty looked around. Across the room, innumerable stacks of books rose like stalagmites from the ancient carpet. Many of these columns were as tall as her. Others had half capsized against each other, forming precarious arches swathed in dust. Books rested high upon a table and filled the cupboards of an open dresser. They receded in unguessed-at numbers through an open door and deep into a side room. A few narrow walkways remained clear, connecting the windows with two sofas squeezed before a fireplace and the exit to the hall.
I think I've got some idea,
she said.
Anyway, here's something to add to your problem.
She picked up her package.
From here, Nix.
The old man's eyes sparkled. Good, good! That would be my edition of Ptolemy's Apocrypha, newly bound in calcite. Carol Hiernick is a marvel. My dear, you have improved my date twice over. I insist you stay for tea. Within half an hour, Kitty had learned 3 things. That the old gentleman was garrulous and affable, that he possessed a fine supply of tea and spice cake, and that his need for an assistant was greatly pressing. My last helper left me a fortnight ago, he said, sighing heavily. Joined up to fight for Britain. I tried to talk him out of it, of course, but his heart was set on going. He believed what he was told. Glory, good prospects, promotion, all that. He'll be dead soon, I expect. Yes, do have the last piece of cake, dear. You need feeding up. It's all very well for him going off to die, but I fear my studies have been severely restricted.
What studies are those, sir?
Kitty asked. Researches, dear. History of magic and other things. A fascinating area, sadly neglected. It's a crying shame that so many libraries are being closed. Once again, the government is acting out of fear. Well, I've saved a good many important books on the subject, and I wish to catalogue and index them. It is my ambition to prepare a definitive list of all surviving jinn. Existing records are so haphazard and contradictory. But as you have seen, I am not even dexterous enough to research my own collection, thanks to this impediment. He shook a fist at his non-existent leg.
And how did it happen, sir?
Kitty ventured.
If you don't mind my asking.
My leg? The old gentleman lowered his brows, glanced left and right, looked up at Kitty. He spoke in a sinister whisper. Married.
Married? But aren't they the most...
The most powerful type of commonly summoned demon, correct. Mr. Button's smile was slightly smug. I'm no slouch, my dear. Not that any of my colleagues, he spoke the word with vehement distaste, would admit as such. Blast them! I'd like to see Rupert Devereux or Carl Mortensen do as well. He sniffed, settled back into his sofa. Wasn't going to enslave it at all. Anyway, I'd forgotten to add a tertiary fettering. The thing broke out and had my leg off before the automatic dismissal set in. He shook his head. That's the penalty of curiosity, my dear. Well, I get by somehow. I'll find another assistant, if the Americans don't kill our entire population of young males. He took a titchy bite of his spice cake. Even before he had swallowed, Kitty had made up her mind.
I'll help you out, sir.
The old magician blinked at her. You?
Yes, sir. I'll be your assistant.
I'm sorry, my dear, but I thought you worked for Hirnix.
Oh, I do, sir, but only temporarily. I'm looking for other work. I'm very interested in books and magic, sir. Really, I am. I've always wanted to learn about it.
Indeed. Do you speak Hebrew?
No, sir.
Or Czech? Or French? Or Arabic?
No, none of those, sir.
Indeed. For a moment, Mr. Button's face became less amiable, less courteous. He looked at her sidelong, out of half-shut eyes. And the fact of the matter is, of course, that you are nothing but a commoner's girl. Kitty nodded brightly.
Yes, sir. But I've always believed that misfortunes of birth shouldn't stand in the way of talent. I'm energetic and quick and nimble, too.
She gestured round the maze of dusty piles.
I'll be able to get hold of any book you like, fast as thinking, from the bottom of the furthest stack.
She grinned, took a sip of tea. The old man was rubbing his chin with small, plump fingers, muttering to himself. A commoner's child, unvetted. It is highly unorthodox. In fact, the authorities expressly forbid it. But, well, after all, why not? He tittered to himself. Why shouldn't I? They've seen fit to neglect me all these years. It would be an interesting experiment. And they'd never know. Blast them. He looked at Kitty again, eyes narrowed. You know I couldn't pay you anything.
That's all right, sir. I'm, interested in knowledge for its own sake. I'll get other work. I could help you out whenever you needed it. Part-time.
Very well, then. Very well. Mr. Button extended a small pink hand. We shall see how it works out. Neither of us has any contractual obligation to the other, you understand, and we are free to terminate the relationship at any time. Mind, if you are lazy or dishonest, I shall raise a hauler to shrivel you. But goodness, where are my manners? I've not yet asked your name. Kitty selected an identity.
Lizzie Temple, sir.
Well, Lizzie, very glad to have met you. I hope we shall get along well. And so they had. From the beginning, Kitty made herself indispensable to Mr. Button. To start with, her chores were entirely concerned with navigating her way about his dark and cluttered house, accessing obscure books in distant stacks and bringing them out to him unscathed. This was easier said than done. She frequently emerged into the lamplight of the magician's study, wheezing and covered in dust, or bruised by a nasty bookfall, only to be told she had the wrong volume or an incorrect edition, and be sent back to begin again. But Kitty stuck with it. Gradually she became adept at locating the volumes Mr. Button required. She began to recognize the names, the covers, the methods of binding employed by different printers in different cities across the centuries. For his part, the magician was highly satisfied. His helper spared him much inconvenience. So the months passed. Kitty took to asking brief questions about some of the works she helped locate. Sometimes Mr. Button gave succinct and breezy answers. More often he suggested she look up the solution herself. Where the book was written in English, this Kitty was able to do. She borrowed some of the easier, more general volumes and took them home to her bedsit. Her nocturnal readings prompted further questions to Mr. Button, who directed her to other texts. In this way, directed by caprice and whimsical inclination, Kitty began to learn. After a year of such progress, Kitty began going on errands for the magician. She procured official passes and visited libraries across the capital. She made occasional forays to herbalists and to suppliers of magical goods. Mr. Button had no imps at his service and did not practice much actual magic. His interest lay in the cultures of the past and the history of contact with demons. Occasionally he summoned a minor entity to question it on a particular historical point. "But it's a difficult business with one leg," he told Kitty. "Summoning's bad enough with two of them, but when you're trying to draw the circle straight and your stick's slipping and you keep dropping the chalk, it's hellish tricky. I don't risk it often anymore."
"I could give you a hand, sir," Kitty suggested. "You'd have to teach me the basics, of course."
"Oh, that would be impossible. Far too dangerous for us both." Kitty found Mr. Button quite adamant on this, and it took her several months of pestering to win him over. Finally, to gain a moment's peace, he allowed her to fill the bowls with incense, hold the pen in position while he inscribed the circles, arcs, and light the pig's fat candles. She stood behind his chair when the demon appeared and was questioned. Afterwards, she helped douse the scorch marks left behind. Her calm demeanor impressed the magician. Soon, she was actively assisting in all his summonings. As in all things, Kitty learned swiftly. She began to memorize some of the common Latin formulae, although she remained ignorant of the language. Mr. Button, who found active work taxing on his health, and who was also inclined to laziness, began to entrust his assistant with more and more procedures. In his cursory way, he helped fill in some of the gaps in her knowledge, although he refused to instruct her formally. "The actual craft," he would say, "is simplicity itself, but it has infinite variations. We shall always keep to basics. Summon the creature, keep it constrained, send it off again. I have neither the time nor the inclination to teach you all the subtleties."
"That's fine, sir,"
Kitty said. She had neither the time nor the inclination to learn them. A basic, practical knowledge of summoning was all that she required. The years passed. The war dragged on. Mr. Button's books were neatly sorted, catalogued, and stacked by author. His assistant was invaluable to him. Now he could direct her to summon foliates and even minor gin while he sat in comfort watching. It was a highly satisfactory arrangement. And, barring the odd fright, Kitty found it satisfactory too. With the kettle boiled at last, Kitty made the tea and returned to the magician, who was sitting as before in the sofa's depths, studying his book. Mr. Button gave a grunt of thanks as she set the teapot down. "Trismegistus notes," he said, "that succubi tend to recklessness when summoned, and are often impelled to self-destruction. They can be placated by placing citrus fruits among the incense, or by the soft playing of panpipes. They are sensual beasts, evidently. He scratched his stump absently through his trousers. Ah, I found something else too, Lizzie. What was that demon you were asking about the other day?
Bartimaeus, sir.
Yes, that's it. Trismegistus has a reference to him in one of his tables of antique gin. Somewhere in the appendices you'll find.
Oh, really, sir? That's great. Thank you.
Gives a little of his summoning history. Brief. You won't find it terribly interesting.
No, sir. I very much doubt it.
She held out a hand.
Do you mind if I take a look?